At some point in your life, you're probably going to be asked to give a presentation, and this can be a great opportunity for you, but only if you prepare correctly. Otherwise, it's an opportunity for failure. Even if you are a great speaker, even if you're charismatic and confident and you're able to walk up on a stage without, as one Cards Against Humanity card put it, peeing a little bit, your presentation can still fall flat on its face and bore your audience to tears if it's founded on a poor idea or structured in a bad way. Fortunately, communicating your ideas to an audience in a way that's persuasive and exciting is a skill that you can learn and get better at. So today I want to share 4 big ideas that you can use to start crafting and delivering better presentations. And speaking of skills that you can learn, this video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 15,000 courses you can take in a ton of different topics, including graphic design, web development, business skills, and of course, presentation skills. And I'm going to talk about them a little bit more near the end of the video and also recommend a couple of courses that you might want to take if you want to improve your presentation skills. But first, let's get into the tips, starting with the absolute most important element of any presentation that you're ever going to give, which is the idea. The underlying idea or concept that you're trying to communicate with your audience is the beating heart of your presentation. As Chris Anderson, the curator of TED, puts it, your number one mission as a speaker is to take something that matters deeply to you and to rebuild it inside the minds of your listeners. And that's what communication is all about, taking your ideas and sharing them with people who are willing to listen. And when it comes to presentations, it's especially important to highlight this because a lot of people are concerned with how they're going to look or how they're going to sound on stage, and they don't give as much thought to the substance and the meaning of the idea that they're communicating. But in truth, the substance of that idea matters so much more than how you look while you're delivering it. So before you ever step on a stage, understand all the details of your idea, understand why your audience should learn about this idea, and make sure that each part of your presentation relates to that idea and supports it. So once you've nailed down the idea behind your presentation, it's time to start looking at some tactics that you can use to make that presentation more compelling. And the first one I want to talk about is storytelling. The human brain is fundamentally wired to be drawn in by a good story, and storytelling is probably the mode of communication that we're most receptive to. Also, telling a story is a great way to add emotion to your talk, and that's especially useful when your idea isn't all that emotional fundamentally. For instance, back when the movie Prometheus was about to come out, the marketing team put out this fake 2023 TED Talk where the CEO of Wayland Industries, Peter Wayland, comes out and he gives this talk about human progression, and it's a pretty self-aggrandizing talk that's basically meant to build up him and his company in the eyes of the audience. But he starts out this talk with a story about the Titan Prometheus stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humanity as their first piece of true technology. And he gets into these ugly and kind of disgusting details about the punishment that the gods used on Prometheus after he did this. And while this isn't all that related to the progress of technology, it's a great way to add some visceral emotion and imagery to the talk that's otherwise kind of sterile. Now, if you're going to add a story to your talk, you need to know the elements of great storytelling. And there are 3 main elements I want to talk about here. Number 1, any good story needs to have a character that the audience can empathize with. And here I want to note that personal stories can be especially effective at forging a connection between you and your audience, especially if that story shows a little bit of vulnerability on your part. You also need a conflict or some sort of problem, basically the thing that makes your audience curious and interested in the story. And finally, you need a satisfying conclusion that ties back into your idea. And on a related note, you've probably heard that telling a story can be a great way to open a presentation or speech. And this is true, but there's a catch. As the author Michael Port puts it in his book Steal the Show, if you're opening with a story, it had better be a great story. Otherwise, open with a note that's intellectually or philosophically important. Often, when a speaker starts with a story, many in the audience think, oh boy, here comes another one of those dull opening stories. In other words, we're all pretty jaded when it comes to the typical way that people structure their talks. After all, most of us have sat in school from anywhere between 18 to 30 years, so we've sat through a lot of presentations and we've seen it all. So if you're using an opening story as a crutch, people are going to catch on right away and it's going to hurt you. Now, in addition to storytelling, another tactic you can use to connect with your audience is to use analogies and metaphors to essentially meet your audience where they are. Using an analogy is a great way to explain something in terms that your audience is going to easily understand. And a really good example of this comes from the movie The Big Short, which is one of my favorite recent films. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with this movie, it's basically a story of how the great financial crash of 2008 happened. And in telling that story, the movie tries to explain the inner workings of some of the outright fraudulent financial inventions that helped to cause it. One of those inventions is called a collateralized debt obligation, or a CDO. But instead of just trying to straight up explain this purposely complicated financial instrument, they create an analogy that's much easier to understand. After Ryan Gosling's character introduces the concept, the camera pans over to Anthony Bourdain, the famous chef, and then he creates a story about how he bought fish on Friday, but then 3 days later it's getting kind of rotten. But instead of throwing it away, he just throws it into a stew and calls it something new. And that creates a much easier to understand picture of how CDO works, and it's much more emotionally visceral as well, since most people have smelled rotten fish but don't even know what a CDO is. Also, analogies and metaphors give you access to yet another tool for connecting with your audience, and that is humor. And one of the masters at using this type of humor that I think you should study is John Oliver. Even though his show covers topics that are objectively boring, like the federal budget, and gerrymandering, and the IRS, millions of people still tune in to watch it because John is an expert at using analogies to tie those boring topics to things that are funnier. For example, in one episode he takes the IRS's practice of literally hanging up on its own customers, which they call a courtesy disconnect, and ties it to other things whose names hide their true meaning, like the Care Bears, who are still vicious bears. And if you can learn to do this as well, especially in a way that connects with your specific audience, you're going to gain their trust and keep them much more engaged throughout the entirety of your presentation. The last tactic I want to talk about today is audience interaction, because if you can take your audience and get them actively involved in the presentation, then you can improve that presentation by a huge margin. And to explain how to do this, I want to tell you a story from my own life. So back in 2012, when I was still a college senior, I flew to New York City for a conference called Blog World. I was a blogger at the time, I was pretty small, and I had a lot of heroes that were going to be there who I really wanted to see. So on the second day of the conference, my friend Alex and I went to go see one of our favorite bloggers give a talk. But we couldn't get into the room because it was standing room only, and there were so many people packed in that there were literally people in the hallway trying to hear what he had to say. So instead of getting into the mosh pit ourselves, my friend Alex says, "Hey, let's go see this guy Marcus Sheridan speak instead." And we go into his room, it's much less packed, and it turns out that Marcus is a pool salesman. So I'm thinking, this guy probably doesn't have a whole lot for me. But by the end of his speech, I was convinced that Marcus was hands down the best presenter at the entire conference. And the reason for this was that Marcus was an expert at audience interaction. And more importantly, he made his audience feel special. My most intense memory from the presentation is when he put up a slide on the projector that just said October 10th, 2008. And underneath there was the number 7,882. And then he asked the audience, does anybody know what this number means and why it relates to this date? And because I had been taking an economics class, I raised my hand and I said, I think that's the number the Dow Jones fell to on October 2008 during the stock market crash. Which was the right answer, and Marcus came over and said, my man, this guy knows what's up, and he made me feel so special that I had absolute rapt attention for the rest of the entire presentation, and I loved it. Now, Marcus is a great speaker across the board. He's got a lot of energy, he's really engaging, and he has a lot of practice doing this type of audience interaction. But still, if you can learn to do this, you're going to have a lot more success in your own presentations. But I do want to give you a couple of warnings. Number one, don't start your presentation off with audience interaction because it can backfire. Remember, when you get up on that stage, you haven't made your first impression yet, so your audience is still naturally a bit skeptical. You have to build their trust first. Secondly, you need to have a plan for what you're going to do if your audience doesn't answer your question in the way you expect, or if they don't answer at all. Now, these are certainly not the only tactics you can use to craft a great presentation. And I think if you want to get better, you should go out and learn from as many sources as you possibly can. And make them diverse. Don't just watch other speakers, watch TV shows, watch movies, watch advertisements. Because these are all forms of communication, they all have information that you can glean and adapt into your own style. Additionally, there is a lot to be learned from taking actual, planned out courses from an expert instructor, and one great place to find those courses is over on Skillshare. Skillshare has a ton of courses you can take in many different topics, but the ones that I want to focus on here are their courses in presentation skills and design. For instance, one of my favorites on the platform is a course called Presentation Essentials by Simon Sinek. And if you're not familiar with Simon Sinek, he gave my favorite TED Talk of all time on a concept called Start With Why, and his course over on Skillshare is an excellent supplement to this video, and if you want to improve your presentation skills, it would be a great idea to go take it. You'll also find courses on how to nail your delivery, on visual storytelling, and on crafting slides that rock, in addition to many other topics. Plans on Skillshare can be had for as low as $10 a month, but if you'd like to start learning today at absolutely no cost, you can get a 2-month free trial by using the link in the description down below and using the code OVATION when you sign up. I want to once again thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video. It really helps to support this channel, and thank you for watching. If you like this video, give it a like to support this channel, and if you have questions questions, leave them down in the comments below and I will do my best to get them answered. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can click right there to subscribe to this channel and get new videos on being a more effective student, and you can click right there to get a free copy of my book on earning better grades. Also, if you want to get another video, you can click right there to watch one, and you can listen to our latest podcast episode right there. Thanks for watching.